Welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. I'm Daniel Farron, co-owner of the company Horns of Odin, and I'm joined, as always, by Dr. Mathias Nordvig.
Hello, everyone. We are joined this time by Shachar Orlinski, who is a PhD student at the University in Tel Aviv in Israel, working on human trafficking in sort of like in the Viking Age and Merovingian period, as far as I understand it. So, as far as I understand, you're focused mainly on the Frankish Empire, but that, of course, has like relations to Scandinavia and all of those things. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. One tiny correction. My alma mater is Tel Aviv University, but I'm at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem.
Right. Okay. Sorry about that.
Same country-ish. Yeah. Close enough.
So I love it when people correct you, Matthias.
Me too.
It makes the episode for me. we can just stop right now, and I'll be happy for the rest of the night. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I'm looking forward to this one. This is one that I find really interesting, and I mean, how studying human trafficking, that must be super depressing at times, even though it's like something so long ago. It is something obviously that still happens still today. Do you ever just read and get a little bit sad?
Well, sure. But look, the thing about, so human trafficking is obviously not something that it's a modern category, right? So it's not something that comes from the source material. Maybe a more accurate way to put it would be, I'm interested, let's say, in the border between slavery and liberty. And it's a murky line.
Right.
The post-Roman early Middle Ages. And I like the term human trafficking in the sense that I think it lets us think a little bit outside of this traditional, like Roman air quotes, paradigm of research of slavery. So because when you talk about slavery in the early Middle Ages, you tend to think about it in very like Roman terms, right? A slave market, it's a legal thing, right? So there are like slavers, there are customers, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of times we totally forget about the fact that there are these people coming from different places and they just take people, and they don't really care about canon law. They don't care about Roman law. They don't care about any of these things.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And I guess like human trafficking is sort of more generally just more of a neutral term that can include a lot of different categories. I mean, we also have people who sell themselves into some kind of bondsmanship or slavery as well, right? So I think in modern terms, when we think about a slave, we usually think about somebody who was like hunted down by slavers and then, traded and then works at some kind of plantation or farm or something like that. But there are so many other ways in which, historically in medieval Europe, how you could become a slave, really. So I think that's a really good point.
And it's not a rigid category as well. I mean, obviously, it's not without reason that when we say slavery, we think about the transatlantic slave trade. But the early medieval scene, let's say, is a completely different thing. Slavery is not a rigid category of existence in the early Middle Ages. You can be a slave, and then, I don't know, your master likes you, or whatever, you buy your own, like, liberty. And then you're not a slave anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many examples of that, not to mention that there are also people who are partially enslaved. So we have the Roman terminology that's being used, and it's up to us as scholars, researchers, to understand what the hell people mean when they use this Roman terminology in the 9th century. Mm-hmm. We have coloni, adscripti, like many of these, like a whole array of partially enslaved individuals, which we don't always know what it means in the context.
Right.
Okay. That's interesting. Because I think that's an important point to make, that I think when most people mention slavery, you automatically think of, like you said, the transatlantic slave trade. But slavery, I imagine, is something that's gone on for as long as humans have been around, and probably, unfortunately, will go on for as long as humans are here. I think anybody that's under the illusion that slavery ended when the transatlantic slave trade ended is just completely wrong, because obviously it's still around today in some fashions. I think I saw something that there's more people enslaved today than any point in human history, which is just a sickening thought. So it is something that, like you said, is it covers such a broad time period. It's not just 200-300 years. I think that a lot of people automatically go to when you mention the word slave.
Yeah, and people are usually really shocked. The first question that I usually get is, "Oh, so who are the slaves in the Middle Ages? Was it like people from Africa?" And then they're shocked to hear that the word slave actually comes from Slavic. The word in German, like sklav, in English, even the word in Arabic at the time, sakaliba, is from Slavic people, basically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A bit horrible. It wasn't only it wasn't only people from Slavic lands that were enslaved.
Yeah, I've always. It's such a tough topic to talk about as well. I think it's one where I find myself treading so lightly, and that's probably why I stumble my words in this, because I'm like trying to make sure that I don't say anything wrong. But it's something that I've always thought is more about what you can make, because it's so easy, especially with the transatlantic slave trade, to focus on race. Whereas I think that before that, it was so much more about just making somebody work for you and what you can gain from it. And it's a power dynamic of a master. And it didn't really matter so much about the color of the skin or anything like that. It was just taking somebody and what you can gain from it, or at least that's what I imagine it to be.
Yeah, that's quite accurate. I mean, throughout the Middle Ages, up to a very, it's some of the Arabic sources later on. So I would say 13th century, maybe. Please, like, not sure at all. That's like the far future as far as I'm concerned. But nobody talks about race. It's not a thing. Right, it's the tough luck. You're someone caught you. You had to sell yourself, whatever. Sorry, tough luck.
Yeah. Well, that's also. Sorry, go ahead.
No. It's as we said earlier. It's not a rigid category. You can also get out of it. It's not something that you're stuck in for life. There's nothing that marks you as a slave.
Yeah. This is what we're also seeing especially in the later medieval period and the early modern period is a lot of slave trade in the Mediterranean, where we have peoples on the North African coast, broadly speaking, right? Enslaving peoples that they find all over the Mediterranean, even going up along the European coast. So we even have slave raids from North Africa on Iceland. The Westman area were targeted for slave raids by the Ottomans, as far as I remember. So that happens also, right? So this is simply because you're looking for that resource of free labor, right? You're going around and doing that wherever possible. And but I think that's first of all, that's an interesting concept in and of itself. We have these societies that allow for the enslavement of other human beings, and then you have to ask yourself, what are the reasonings for all of this? Usually before the transatlantic slave trade is this tough luck situation, right? It's like, oh, shit happens. And then with the transatlantic slavery, then it becomes a matter of race very quickly, because of all the dynamics that are happening in the modern period in Europe as well. But there's also, so that's one aspect. we have basically an economy that has slavery as part of it. But then you also have societies that are where their economy is like fundamentally based off of slavery, which would be the United States at a certain time period, especially the southern states, right? But I've recently come across some suggestions that actually, like Viking Age Scandinavia was also very much a slave economy in that, especially in the what we could call the High Viking Age. I don't know if you have anything to say about that, Shachar.
Not as much as I would like to, but somehow I find it's hard for me to 100% agree with something like that, because looking instead of to the early United States, to, let's say, Roman society, that was the example for a slave society. I really, and even in Roman times, okay, we have the every once in a while you see this like huge latifundia, right? It's like these huge estates with hundreds of slaves. But for the most part, what does it mean? So what do slaves do? What do you need slaves in Scandinavia for? Okay, so you have 3 slaves working in your garden. Okay, 2 other slaves working in like domestic slaves, right? Someone to take care of your kids, and someone else to do the cooking and the washing. Okay. It's a question. What does it mean, slave society? And then when we think about Vikings specifically, not just generally society in Scandinavia and in the Middle Ages, then that becomes even more tricky, because what are we talking about? Are we talking about slaves that go on ships? I mean, there's another. I think there was a study a few years ago. I can't remember who conducted it at all, but they looked at DNA, I think, in Iceland, and they realized that like some really like high percentage of females in Iceland were descended from Irish, like an Irish line, suggesting that there was slaves or like slave women, slave girls that were brought from Ireland. So maybe.
Yeah, no,
but I think it's worth like asking, what does it actually mean, a slave society, and when?
Yeah, no, that's true. And so what I was specifically referring to in this regard is that there is one excavation of like a settlement in Sweden, I think it is, where it very much looks like you had sort of like a plantation style setup with slave huts and then sort of like a managerial overlooking kind of post and everything. I can't remember the site now, unfortunately, but that's just interesting to consider. And then you also have to ask, what were they growing?
They weren't growing anything. So there's one interesting idea that there was an industry of furs.
Right. Yeah.
So, and you don't grow furs. It's a dirty, dirty business, but you don't grow it.
That makes sense. So, yeah. No. So basically, they could have been in sort of working on the all the doing all the dirty work of like skinning and all that stuff. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well,
a slave society in a specific settlement in Sweden.
Yeah, well, there you go.
One thing I guess I've always wondered is, do we know, was there any compassion towards slaves, particularly in, say, like the Viking Age? Do we have any evidence of slave owners feeling bad or guilt and then wanting to set their slave free because it was, they saw it as something that was wrong or bad, I guess. I guess because I always have this idea of the humans will always try to justify what they do. So I wondered whether the Vikings would justify taking slaves in the same way I think that maybe people in America and Europe justified the transatlantic slave trade through skin color and, saying that black people are lesser humans and all that kind of bullshit. And I wondered whether that was the same thing we saw with Scandinavia, and maybe even with Christians, they're different to us. So that's why we're going to take them as slaves, because they're different, and that's how they justify it. And that guilt aspect kind of disappears, I guess. I think I mumbled my way through that somehow.
Many things to answer here.
I'm just trying so hard not to say anything wrong.
No, but I think this takes us to a very interesting point. If anything, the fact that people are Christian I don't think it means anything to say Vikings who take them as slaves, but it means much more to Christians sitting in Francia.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well,
so I don't know, Willy Broad sitting in Utrecht somewhere, right? He goes like, "Oh no, there are Christians in wherever. Like, oh, we need to go there." And like,
I guess what I was getting at is that even though we're talking about humans 1,000 years ago, they still must have some form of compassion. And even though I guess it's normalized in their society certainly more than it is today, whether that they would justify it, I guess, by saying these people are different because of their religion. So it's not quite as bad as, say, taking Bob from the next farm over as a slave.
They probably also did take Bob from the next farm.
Okay. I guess maybe that's I was wondering whether there was that distinction of we go into other lands and taking them because they are in some way different and they can justify it, rather than just taking their neighbor as a slave.
So what? There's a couple of things to consider. One thing is the Christian society in Western Europe, in particular, of course, has the perception of like non-Christians that you can do anything to them, pretty much, right? That's an in-group, out-group thinking that is being established. I guess with the Frankish Empire, actually. No? Was it there before?
Point of information, I think. I mean, there's that perception, and I think in the Frankish sources, you really see an effort to talk about these raids as a religion thing, right? Almost like using the word crusade here is completely like anachronistic, but they talk about them, these Dani, Nordmani, as heathens, as pagans. But it's something that I think is much more prominent for the Christians than to the other side. And they talk about them, as if they're these monstrous, beasts with like 3 heads, but they're very much the people of their time. You think about Charlemagne going all ISIS on the Saxons. Mm-hmm.
No, but that's a really good point, right? Because Charlemagne sets sort of like the standard for how you, as a Christian nation, can deal with non-Christian nations in Europe at this time. I mean, this is what really sets off the future, justifications. For instance, for when the Danes, they start harassing the Estonians and the Polish or the Wends, I guess they are, after they have been Christianized, right, in the 1100s, then you see the Danes going on crusades, right? This is all just, a way of like justifying that you want to conquer your neighbor, or that you have to put that neighbor down because they are doing piracy in your waters or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, they're heathens. So there's that aspect, and yeah, I think you're totally right that the Scandinavians, they're not focused on talking too much about like what kind of people are they, the ones that we're enslaving. Like they're just like foreigners, hence the word Welsh, Vader, right? And just foreigners. And that's a good point. But if we look at the source material, right, in broadly in the medieval period on like how are they talking about other peoples, right, in Christian Europe, then that the heathen category is definitely the main reason that you have the right to like go fuck them up. Like,
I think there is a difference though between like later in the Middle Ages, so not the later Middle Ages, but like the 1100s, let's say, and the 7th, 8th centuries in the sense that there's a question of who is actually under your jurisdiction. The two main others that we see in the sources, so like in ecclesiastical sources, the synods and so on, are heathens and Jews, like pagans and Jews. And it's interesting to see in which cases, so you're not allowed to sell a Christian to either like pagans or Jews, because obviously I think the idea is that every slave is a Christian, right? In esse or in posse. So either like actually a Christian, or he or she can be Christian.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want is for God forbid, someone to convert them to something else, right?
Right.
But Jews are much easier they live within Christendom, right? They're much easier to put your hands on. Unlike pagans that are usually without the borders of Christendom. And then what we see, which is really interesting, I think, is that in many cases, when Jews are involved, then the sources demand the punishment for the Jews. And when pagans are involved, or when Christians sell their slaves to pagans, then it's the person who sold their slaves to the pagan whose punishment is sought for.
Okay.
Because you can't, the pagans, they're not there anymore, right? They came to like freaking Dorstad, whatever. They took 3 people, anything that wasn't nailed to the floor, and left. Goes to look for them,
Does that mean that the Christians saw Christian slaves as more than like pagans or Jews? Would they have seen them higher in the class order, even though they're slaves, because of obviously that you can't sell them to them?
It's a hard question to answer. I think, again, because slavery is not something that's outside of it, it's not being justified in terms of this person is not as much a person as I am. I think people saw what was around them, and they saw that, someone, my cousin from I don't know, my cousin from Dorstad, whatever, was taken by Vikings, right? And now the poor Katla is a slave. So people saw that around them, probably. And they knew that anyone could become a slave, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And if you're part of the Christian establishment, if you can say that, then you value them more because they're Christian. It has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that, like, with their enslavement. And we see it. It's a Christian thing to go and ransom captives. We have a few saints from the 7th century, like Eligius is a good example of Noyon, so from Francia, who's in his Vita, in his saint's life, we are told, even though it's a tricky source, whatever, we are told that he has a hobby, right? His favorite thing in the world is to go and ransom captives. One time he ransomed the whole boatload of slaves. Most of them were Saxons. Great. And he even gave them the choice of whether or not to join the church. How nice, right? And that's another issue. That's a question, right? When the church ransoms slaves, does it mean that they're actually buying slaves?
That's a really good question, right? Yeah, no, I mean,
because it's not free labor, right? You have to buy them, or you have to, like, even if you just kidnap them, that also takes a lot of money, and then you have to make sure that they don't die on the way, right? That they look good enough to be sold.
And that's also Ansgar, right? Yeah, the so-called Apostle of the North, credited with bringing Christianity to both Denmark and Sweden. I mean, he's doing this, right? He's buying slaves to bring them back to raise them in his schools as Christians and then send them back, right, as missionaries.
It's actually really broad. Ansgar is doing something like that also, but Ansgar is he's an interesting case. He's supposedly there's an envoy that's being sent, or that was sent from Birka to Louis the Pious, seeking to get someone to come and like baptize, tell the poor heathens in Birka all about Christianity. And Ansgar goes like, sure, I'm coming. He takes his guys and they go up to Birka, barely survive the journey. And when they get there, so they're the king of Birka, whatever that means, right? Tiny place. Welcomes them, and he inquires. He has to ask his fidelis, his loyals, if they okay this thing, which is surprising, right? Because the source just told us that he called for this mission to come. So something is weird here. And then you actually realize that it wasn't him. It wasn't Bjorn, the king of Birka, that called for this mission. It was someone else. It was like this chieftain who's a counselor of Bjorn called Herigar, who later on he converts, and he's like the most like devout Christian on Birka. He's the one who probably called for Ansgar. And Ansgar says in his Vita, it says that there were many Christian captives in Birka. So then there's the question that I personally find the most interesting in this context is who influences who, right? If we have that many Christian captives on Birka and in other places as well, in Vita Rimberti, we see many Christian captives in Hedby. And a church that's being built, right? So these Christian captives, first of all, they represent the strongest entity in the area, the Frankish Empire. These guys are America, right? At the time, maybe Constantinople is America, but they're like, I don't know, little of whatever.
The
UK. But they're like the coolest thing in the neighborhood, right? You want to be like them. And I think they expose their masters maybe even to Christianity. And then there's all the more of an interest not to ransom them, actually, even though that's what you're saintly you're supposed to do. Why would you do that? I mean, going there and making sure that, sure, their Christian souls are in peril, but you can take care of that very easily, right? All you need to do is just build a church. And then you literally set in stone the Christian presence in the north.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so So basically, in that sense, they work as sort of like inception agents.
like ready-made congregations, if you will, or like unwitting apostles of the north.
Yeah. Okay, so there are two questions that I want to tackle here, because one is the discussion about like the introduction of Christianity in Scandinavia in general. That one originated in the whole idea that it was sort of like it spread through the lower classes. The masses became Christian before the top did in society. So that was then something that, scholars revised over the last 30 years, and were like, maybe that was probably not the case. Maybe it was more like, the established elites that saw a benefit, and they converted to Christianity. So where do we land on all of that stuff with these discussions that we just had right now?
I think it's a combination of these two things. So either to suggest that it was either a top-down or a bottom-up process, I think it would be inaccurate, because it's a society, it's a living thing. It's not, they didn't hear about the fact that they need to adhere to rules of, the study of sociology or whatever. It's probably a combination of things. On the one hand, you have, the people like Olaf Tryggvason, right? These guys who were so Christian and pious when they weren't splitting skulls in half. And on the other hand, you have local saints like, Brigitta, whatever, and her daughter, couldn't be any more saintly than that.
Until, of course, she was called a witch.
And then you have these people, and I think that challenges this model in the sense that in order to buy slaves and in order to have slaves, you had to have been a powerful player. But then these slaves are the poorest of the poor. they're completely, they're disconnected from their networks of support. Maybe they have each other and they see each other, I don't know, in the market. Oh, when they buy like freaking cabbage for their masters. But they're isolated. So these are the poorest of the poor. And then you have people who are pretty powerful in society bringing these foreign agents. It's kind of how, and all of these things kind of exist at the same time. But the Christian, sorry that I'm cutting off, but I think actually what brought me to this subject to begin with is actually the questions of the Christianization of Scandinavia, because the weirdest thing happens with the Christianization of Scandinavia. It's unlike any other ethnic group or group in general in the Middle Ages. They convert from a position of power, which is really weird. And so a good example would be Rollo, what's his face? The first count of the first Duke of Normandy. So there's a whole story. He converts to Christianity after the back and forth, a siege of like the area, and then at a certain point, Charles the Simple, Charles the Simple. That is not a compliment.
I feel like that'd be my monarch name. That's the one I'd get.
In 911, they signed the Treaty of St. Clair-sur-Epte. Basically, they go like, okay, so you, Rolf, right now you'll be Rollo from now on, Robert later on. You convert to Christianity, and we'll give you this whole area from the Epte, from the river all the way to the sea, the entirety of Normandy. And in return, you have to promise us to treat other Vikings if they come. Like, be nice to us. Make sure they don't come here. And there's a whole story of how when his men converted, they had to be like told off, because some of them came and tried to be baptized like 3 times because they got these nice white fabrics. And someone had to tell them, no, you can't do that. You can only be converted once. You can only be baptized once. And other sources that talk about how Christ, the figure of Christ, was received in Scandinavia as like, I can't remember his name, whatever, like someone who I think it's Saxo talks about it, if I remember correctly. When they first tried to convert the Danes, then the local pagan priests were like, sure, your Christ is like a thing, but our gods are better. So you have these like syncretistic perceptions, and even later on, where we have amulets that mention Christ, Odin, the devil, the Beelzebub, every possible deity that they can think of. And Christianity, it's a very interesting thing.
Well, there's also the interesting thing about Scandinavia is also that it kind of looks like there are some sort of like conceptual ideas that are attached to the pre-Christian deities that live on with the saints in Scandinavia. The best example is this guy who goes to Uppsala and sacrifices a horse to Saint Eric, right? It's like, that seems like a very pagan thing to do, my friend. So it's like you have the crossover between both Olav Tryggvason and Olav the Holy, and then Thor, right? They're like represented kind of similarly to Thor. Saint Knut of Denmark sometimes sort of like gravitates a little towards Odin in representations and so on. So there's definitely some weird syncretism going on in Scandinavia, and I think you're totally right that it is odd that they convert from a position of power. There's a couple of things when it comes to like Denmark, which is quite interesting, because we have Harald Bluetooth, who's responsible for having converted the Danes. And they're diverting stories on why that happened. Right? So the Danish story goes that he was so impressed with the German bishop Poppo who carried iron, hot glowing iron in his hands, right? So that was like the story where the king was like, huh, wow, that's pretty cool. Well, I'll convert to your god then. Then we also have the other story where, and that's the one that we find in the Old Norse material in the saga literature, right? Where a good friend, Harold Bluetooth, got his ass kicked by, I think it was Emperor Otto, and then he had to convert to Christianity. So that's also interesting, right? We have like this. We have literally like the diametrically different sources when it comes to like telling us why Denmark as such converted, and Sweden is just a whole mess because it looks like we have Christian kings in the 900s, and then it goes away again. Then we have pagan kings, and then we have some Christian kings again, and then eventually they sort of like just like it wasn't so much of like now we're Christian. It was more like okay, we're Christian. In the late thousands. So yeah, it's a mess.
Yeah, I mean, but you think also about you mentioned Harald Blåtand. So just think about how Christ is depicted on the Yellingstone.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be the scene of, if you haven't seen it out there, it's supposed to be the scene of the crucifixion. But instead of that, what you see is this like angry figure, you know, like hands stretched, like arms stretched, serpents or whatever around him, and he's like this really strong figure. I think this is the best visual depiction of the Christianization of Scandinavia.
Oh, yeah.
We'll take him, but like he's not nailed to a cross.
Yeah. No, they couldn't.
Just tough Christ.
Yeah, he's a tough Christ. It's the same with the Saxon Gospel, right? Which is just such an amazing story in terms of like translating the Gospels, because we're dealing with a Jesus who's like got a big ass sword and a bunch of warriors with him, and he's hanging out in a castle. It's not that like suffering Christ. Like for Northern Europe, they had to sort of like, you know, this is a warrior god, guys. Like that you want a warrior god.
We're in a very tough sell otherwise. I think he's a pacifist. Turn the other cheek.
They're like, what's he good for then?
The main question for me when it comes to this topic is how forced was the Christianization of Scandinavia? And that's because every time I frequent the Facebook groups online, you always see like the modern day kind of like Viking bros, people who are interested in this sort of culture, the typically bearded, tough male that looks quite a lot like I do. They're always very much of this idea that the Vikings did a big last stand and it was Christianity was forced upon them, and they had no, you know, it was something that wasn't done willingly. They would have stayed pagan if they could have. Christians came in and it was very much, you know, forced, and that was it. And I guess it's their way of maybe justifying it today. And Christians are the, you know, this big evil thing that just came and demanded it. And whereas I understand it to maybe be a little bit more different, and that people converted because they were offered nice, pretty things, and it made sense to, or they were offered land or power and wealth, and you know, the people in power went, yeah, all right, I'll take that.
Yeah, I mean, the best example probably is Harald Hardrada, right? The toughest dude on earth, was Christian through and through. I'm not sure what it meant for him, but you know, I hate to break it. Some of them were very Christian. I mean, they were nominally Christian, at least.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to think that's another thing. We tend to think about people in the Middle Ages as, oh, you know, they were all super religious. They couldn't think outside of this. Like they cared about the entire day was, oh, they're gods. Oh, you know, like walking around praying to God. Most people were just people. I mean, we're not. We like to tell ourselves that we're so different than they were. But in the end of the day, probably people are just interested in living their lives. They kind of believe in something that, you know, puts order into their existence and gives them hope. But that's it. And eventually, you meet a nice Frisian lady, and okay, she's Christian, and fine, I'll convert, and
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense.
That kind of stuff happens today still.
Yeah, it does.
And I think, they say people they're just like us, and I guess they're Christian or appear to be very Christian when the time matters and they're told to. When it comes down to the nitty-gritty, maybe on a Sunday, and they said you have to go to church or else, then it's like, all right, I'll do it. But Monday through Saturday, maybe not so much. Maybe there's a little bit of sin.
Yeah, good example for that. It's we see it put into the Christian establishment, the highest levels of the Christian establishment. It's out of the discussion, maybe in a way, but ideas like Pax Dei, right, the peace of God, very much like a crusader thing. But basically, they go, Urban II goes like, oh no, it's not okay to fight on Sunday, and also Wednesday is not amazing. So try to make sure that you do your fighting between Monday and Tuesday, and the peace of God. So they find, because again, a lot happens between this weird Jewish sect in the first, second, third centuries, and until it goes all the way up north, and it takes on a completely different form. Even in Merovingian times, these guys will not have recognized the Christianity of I don't know, say the synoptic gospels. That's
this is such a good point, and that this is also something that modern observers have to consider, that the ways in which we think about Christianity today are more informed by the 19th century than anything else. Christianity before the 19th century looked very different, my friends. This whole thing of piety and sin and all that stuff, not a big deal in the early medieval period. That's not really what we're talking about when we're talking about normal people. Good example of this, the Danish laws on premarital sex for women were if she gets pregnant, then the dudes in her family have the right to go tell the guy who got her pregnant that he has to take care of her. No punishment or anything. They're like, well, we need to sort out this issue of now she got pregnant. So that tells you something.
The original shotgun wedding.
Yeah, totally. They're not particularly they don't care about her virginity or some crap like that. It's just well, if she got pregnant, you got to fix it, man. So
people are so shit.
Well, it's just
it's your problem now.
We see it also in kidnap, laws concerning kidnap in Merovingian Gaul. You see it in the Salic law, right? You're not allowed to do that. Sorry, but if it's not a crime against the woman necessarily, right? It's a crime against whoever it is that holds her guardianship, her mundium or mundiburdium. It's a mess, right? Because this is what happens if you end up impregnating the wrong person. You make a connection between the wrong families. It makes a mess for everybody.
Exactly. And that's the real problem. It makes a mess for everybody.
I've seen Romeo and Juliet. I understand that.
Yeah, you know what it's about. But okay, so one thing, when the Franks convert to Christianity, what is that, in the early 500s? So the main problem that, if we look at Scandinavia, the main problem that Scandinavians will have, right, these magnates in Scandinavia, is that their connections start to fizzle out. Because they, from say around the 200-300s, we see Scandinavians establishing these loyalty bonds and alliances throughout Europe. This is what we can see with the exchange of various precious jewelry, for instance, gifts that are obviously being sent around, right? This is why we also have the Rökstone in Sweden that mentions Thjolrekr the Great, right? So the Gothic king of Lombardy. this tells us everything about how connected Scandinavians are to the central and southern and even like southwestern parts of Europe, with the dispersal of the Goths all over the place, and then the Franks and other peoples, right? And then we have the Franks converting to Christianity and being like, okay, now we can't hang with our cousins up north, and so that's a major problem. So what do you think that has to say with, like, in terms of the developments of warfare and these Viking incursions that then happen later on? Is that sort of like a desperation kind of thing? Now, especially also because the Franks then, make sure to convert the English, and so by the middle of the 600s, the English are converted to Christianity, and that, I guess, might also represent a trade problem for the Scandinavians.
Well, that was definitely an incentive. I'm certain of that. But again, you said the Franks make sure to convert the Anglo-Saxons. Sure, they send, Augustine to be of Canterbury, and Berta, right? She's like this major thing. But it's kind of like, this is the fashion, right? This is like bon ton. This is what everybody does now. And we see these incursions specifically in Frisia. I don't know what it is about Frisia. Maybe it's the cows. So attractive. But the first raid on Frisia is actually, that I know of, is from the very beginning of the 6th century. We see it in Gregory of Tours. Right, and somewhere between 514 and 534, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, sounds about right. What is his name? That it's Hugleik.
It's supposed to be Hugleik, yeah, from no,
Beowulf, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a very successful raid, but there's no doubt. I mean, these people, they're right there, right? If they're in Birka, they're just across the North Sea. It's what 3 days like worth of a boat ride. And also they probably understand the people that they take. They know their way around. They also trade with these people. We have this like tendency to think about it as like two different things, right? You either take slaves or you trade. Well, probably they did both. Well, they're practical people, right?
Yeah.
And that would have made it even more scary in many ways, like even scarier for them for the people who were raided. And we see that a lot of times these raids happened on saints' days or on Sunday. Well, that probably wasn't by chance.
No.
And I don't know. I think it makes sense to suggest that their conversion to Christianity probably had a lot to do with political pressure, because religion is part of life, and especially if your perception is somewhat like syncretistic, it's not a problem for you to go, okay, fine, I'm converting to Christianity, cool. So now I have Christ, I have this God, and I also have the other gods, and we see it in the reluctant skald from Olaf Tryggvason's conversion. I can't remember the last time I dealt with it was years ago, but he goes like, oh, Odin is mad at me now, and like for converting, but this is what my king wants, so woe is me.
Could you get people who just edge the bets and were, I'm just going to pray to both, or at least like pray to God and give offerings to the pagan gods, and
supposedly that's whatever's fun, right?
Whatever's real is real, and
we have a couple of examples of that. What is his name? Helgi or Hjalti, I can't remember. Some guy who's mentioned in the Book of Icelanders or the Book of Settlements. He's like a devout Christian, it says, but when he goes sailing, he always sacrifices to Thor. So, you just make sure that your back's covered in any way.
On my deathbed, I'm praying to every god I know, and all the ones I don't as well. I'm going to make up a few just in case. Just in case I get it right, who knows? We don't know what's gonna. I don't know what's out there after.
Well, I mean, I am certain that I'll be haunting someplace somewhere. That's my deal.
Well, I'll keep my eyes out.
Okay, so one thing we do have from Scandinavia is a source that sort of like justifies slavery, right? That's the Riksdula, this late Eddic poem. I guess you can translate it to Riek's journey, or more accurately, Riek's poem or list or something like that. But it's the story about this god Riek who is possibly Heimdallr. That's what it's said in the prose introduction to the poem. And he goes on this journey. He's just like, I'll walk along the coast, and then I'll get to a house, and then I'll spend 3 nights with the lady who lives in that house, because that's apparently what you could do when you're a Nordic god. So he does that with this is generational, right? So the first couple is great grandmother and great grandfather, and they're the ones who engender the slaves. The next one is grandmother and grandfather, and they're the ones who engender the middle class of society, I guess. And then the last ones, so that would be the free peasants. The last ones are mom and dad, and they then become the progenitors of the aristocracy. And a couple of things that we can say is that this poem is probably relatively young. It's definitely composed post-conversion. It's not found in the main collection of Eddic poetry called the Codex Regius. It's found in, I think it is found in a manuscript that also contains Snorri's Edda, so a later manuscript from the 1300s, if I remember correctly. And so that's a very much like, it talks about feudalism, right? That's what it does. It just describes sort of like a godly ordained feudalism, and that's coming back to what you were talking about, Dan, about like how would they justify these things. Well, that's an example of how you typically see this stuff justified in earlier society. Like go back to other polytheistic societies, and you'll see that there's like some kind of like a reasoning that goes along with like this particular god, or people who belong to this god over here, as opposed to people who belong to this god, and so on. That's the way you see this justified. And this, is very similar in Christianity as well. You find, Christian arguments for why there should be slaves and so on. But yeah, so a couple of things that you can say about that poem is that it's probably not from the pre-Christian period. That's something to keep in mind. And when you go to the pre-Christian period, the rune stones are our best source to knowledge about like the relationship between slave owners and slaves. And especially because there are several rune stones from Scandinavia that talk about a freed person. There's one from my hometown, Aarhus, where this guy he raises a stone over his old master, and he mentions that his master gave him his freedom.
Drops on his head. I mean, that's one way to get freedom, I guess.
No. So the thing is, he's praising his master for giving him his freedom and given him gold to establish himself. Mm-hmm. So that's an example of somebody who had a lot of luck afterwards. Like he was basically like taken a slave or sold to the person as slave, and then for some time period he was this person's slave, and then this guy was like, well, I'm going to give you your freedom now, and here's some gold to get set up, and there you go. So that's something that we see in some of the runestone material.
I mean, that must happen, because at the end of the day we are talking about people, and people are a spectrum. You will get some that are super shitty and like, no, I'm never freeing my slaves, I don't want to do the hard work. But then you will get some who get to know their slaves. They will undoubtedly truly have some sort of interaction, conversation, see them as human, and then like, I kind of do feel a little bit bad about this, and then set them free. That must happen. It can't just be a case of black and white. Like so many people try to put them in everything in these boxes. Whereas
there's also the other one, right? It's like, oh man, I see you so much as a human. I really like you. I really love you. That's why I'm never letting you go.
That's Cicero and his slave, if I remember correctly.
I mean, yeah, he's probably just a really good worker, I imagine.
No,
You do your job so good.
Not all of them were workers. I mean, some. Okay, we know it more from the Roman case, but some slaves are quite educated. Specifically, this guy that we just mentioned, Cicero's slave, was probably one of the richest people in Rome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Greek teachers were like a typical type of slave that you could have in Roman society, right?
Yeah, and I think there's no reason to suspect the Scandinavian case was any different, especially again, like especially with slaves coming from closer places. Slaves taken in Phrygia, I imagine, were better slaves for personal use, let's say, rather than for selling far away, because they probably spoke a language that was close enough to people, they could understand each other quite easily, I assume. So that's a good slave to have at home. Maybe they're Christian. Maybe we want, now we're newly Christian and we actually want, I don't know,
we want a Christian
to, like,
slave.
teach our children, and like the nanny, we kidnap the nanny from.
This sounds so bad now, but I wonder if there was like a shopping list for slaves, which sounds really awful, but like if maybe, I don't know, maybe somebody did want a particular role and they're like, go see if you can find someone who can fill this role. Because I guess I never,
before you get me the right slave.
That's it, yeah. I never thought of it. I guess I always thought of it on a very basic level of, you just took a slave and you made him work he plowed the field for you, and that's how it was. That was my very simplistic mind putting it in. I never thought of it being, if you took somebody who was highly educated, you could then use them to, I guess, to educate your people or your children. So I wonder if there was a shopping list is a bad word, but I guess you know what I mean by it. I can't think of a better one.
Shopping list is exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's correct, but it just feels bad saying it.
I haven't seen anything like it, but you know what? Maybe if we think about it the other way around, so not on the side of Vikings taking Christian slaves, but rather missionaries grabbing Scandinavian children, that's definitely a shopping list type situation. They're in their mind, they're not taking slaves, obviously, but going back to Willibrord, we just mentioned, there's the whole story of him, right? He's trying to convert Radbod, and Radbod is like all nice to him, but he's like, thank you very much, I'm not converting. Funny story, by the way. He's it happens later, but there's the bit with Radbod. He's already in the baptismal font, and then he asks, oh, are my ancestors going to join me in like beautiful Christian heaven? And Willibrord goes, look, they're pagan, so no, they're going to stay in hell. And then Radbod goes, I think I'm gonna stick to my ancestors in hell. Atata, stepping out of the baptismal font. But before that happens, there's the story with Willibrord that so he's getting tired of Radbod, so he decides to take on a new mission. He really tries hard to get himself martyred. It doesn't work. But he decides to go to like the Danish people and their the scariest king, Ongendus, who's a complete beast. And then he goes there, and Ongendus is actually quite nice to him, but nobody's interested in converting to Christianity. So he chooses 30 children, and he takes them quickly with him back to Francia. And he makes sure to baptize them before they go on the boats, in case anything happens to them. So at least they're Christian, and he took care of them. And I think, Matthias, you said something about it earlier. Why on earth would they do that? There's a good reason to do that, because these kids, they do speak the language. And then if you take them to a monastery and you raise them there, you can later send them back as missionaries. Stockholm syndrome, I believe, right?
You have no.
Right.
For the same reason, the Brigham Young University over in Utah has a language program for pretty much any European language. They're sending missionaries.
You have no idea how hard my mind was working to try and figure out a Catholic priest joke then. I was trying so hard to think of something, but I couldn't quite land on it. But I did. There's a joke there, I'm telling you.
There's totally a joke there. Okay, so a couple of things. One thing I'd say is that I think, aside from the Scandinavians converting from like a position of power, I'd say there's probably a lot of like Eastern Europeans that are doing the same thing. The Rus come to mind as like Vladimir, right? Vladimir the First, who's sort of like the Christianizer king of the Rus. He starts out as pagan. He's been hanging out in Scandinavia for about 10 years before he comes back to like become king. And then he's first very big on my ancestral religion, and let me put a statue of Perun outside of my great hall and all these things. And then all of a sudden he's like, fuck it, Christianity is the best. And then he goes with that. And I think that's another good example of sort of like a ruler who's converting from a position of power. One of the interesting things is that from around his time, I think it is, there are Saxon missionaries in his in the area, right? And there's one Saxon missionary who says something, who reports back something like, this whole area is teeming with runaway slaves and Danes. Like, that's sort of like specifically what it says.
Maybe it's even Boniface. Is that possible?
It could be, yeah.
It could be Boniface. Boniface has a lot of. So he's the guy that was another Anglo-Saxon, right? They have like this weird fixation on going back to like the Saxons and trying to convert them. He has a lot of rant on like pagans, and like a cool example is in a letter that Pope Gregory III sends him for his becoming archbishop to the Germans. He reminds him of his duties, and among them to bring to justice these Christians who would sell their slaves to pagan priests to be ritually sacrificed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, damn. And he demands that they would be, brought to justice as murderers, because these are the only guys that he can bring to justice, right? You can't really take the pagan priests; they won't come probably if they existed at all.
Once the Christianization started, do you think that it's like a house of cards where people just jump on because it's happening, it's a thing, people around them have converted, so it's like, well, may as well go along with it, kind of just taking the winning side, I guess, kind of like Italy in World War II. Just do what you gotta do.
Yeah, I mean, peer pressure, right? Peer pressure always works. And also you want to trade with other people, right? Christians won't trade with you if you're not Christian. So fine, you're Christian. Okay.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, so there's some advantages, especially from after Charlemagne's conquest of the Saxons. That's where really, like, as I was alluding to before, we had this, these alliances that exist between these different Scandinavian rulers and then, other Germanic associated rulers around in Europe. And that starts breaking down with the Franks converting to Christianity, especially when we then get to Charlemagne, and Charlemagne has like this whole plan of like, he's like, oh, these people over here, they don't have Christianity. Well, we definitely need to bring them Christianity. Sort of like Americans and oil, right? And I think I've made that joke before. These people have oil. Well, they need freedom. And so he invades Thuringia and what is now Austria. He invades Saxony and so on. And that's when the Danes start shitting themselves. That's very obvious. We know that the Danish king, or whatever he is, in that time period, the Saxon king, he goes to Denmark in exile. He comes back with a bunch of mercenaries and so on. There's a lot of support coming from the Danish area, whatever kind of like kingdom or polity it is. And after that, then we have the slow spread of Christianity northwards and eastwards, and these different kings that are then also rivaling each other in Scandinavia, they will be benefiting from alliances with those Christians to the south and the west, right? And that's really what we see. So when Haraldi, he's standing there on Stamford Bridge and kicking English ass with his Dane axe, that's really the culmination of all of this, because why is he even there in the first place? He's there because he has a familial claim to the throne of England, because his elite family is mixed in with the old English elite families. This is also why William the Conqueror shows up later on. He's also, part of that whole, these are all cousins fighting each other at this point. And it's the same thing when you go to the east. Like there's a reason that Denmark in the 1400s has a king named Bukislav that they have to rename to Eric, because I guess that's easier to say. I don't know. And like that comes out of a very, very long a period of mingling between the Scandinavian royal houses and the Polish and Russian and elsewhere in the East, right? So for the Scandinavian rulers, one of the best ways to create an alliance in, say, the 900s is really to convert to Christianity and then marry some princess from the south, and that's how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, we see it even with Lothar, the son of Louis the Pious. He gives Frisia, actually, as beneficium to the Danish king in 830 something, 840, mm-hmm. something like that. He gives and then the monks in San Bertrand go all crazy and they go like, "Oh Jesus, what are you doing?" Pun unintended, but that's like a really really good example.
Yeah, that's for converting
money, right? It gets you stuff.
Yeah,
converting to Christianity.
Awesome. Okay, before we wrap this little topic up, so it seems as though the Christianization was more of an idea, I guess, that spread throughout almost, I guess, I don't know if peaceful is the right word, but it's not some fire and tongue kind of conversion where it's an army at your door and they're making people by brute force, which I think a lot of people in modern day might believe, which is why I'm quite keen to maybe dispel that idea, this idea that it was very much forced, by sword, and the Vikings were so heroic and on bent knee made to become Christian, whereas maybe that's not how it happened.
And if it had, if I may, if it had, then it happened within Scandinavia. It was more the outcome of political interests, going back to Olaf Tryggvason and Olaf the Saint, or Olaf the Holy. This is exactly what happens. These guys, sure, they're Christian, fine, but they tend to go and let all hell break loose on people who are their political opponents.
Mm-hmm.
Probably in the name of Christianity, but also they happen to be, and in some cases these enemies of Christianity were actually Christian themselves.
Mm. Yeah, that's another really good point. Like sometimes what we're seeing is, so these guys are they belong to the Greek church. So yeah, we can go kick their ass too. Like that's another. And keep in mind too that in this time period, from the 900s and onwards, what we have in northeastern Europe in general are multiple versions of Christianity too, competing to bring themselves in the forefront. So we know who won that battle. That was like the German church, but the English church is also very much involved in Scandinavia in the earlier period. So from around the year 1000, that's when the German church takes over, right? And the German church is here defined by Hamburg, the Archbishopric of Hamburg. I think it's in 1034 or something like that. We see the Archbishop of Hamburg, Bremen. He basically appoints priests and bishops to 20 different places in Scandinavia, the Faroe Islands, Norway, Denmark, all over the place. And so that's pretty powerful, right? And this is what the English church was trying to do and hoping to do, especially under Knut the Great, and just a little before, right? And so there's like this competition, and that's what our German bishopric here manages to do. And in the same way, we also have the Eastern Church is definitely also involved in trying to convert Scandinavia. I mean, there's even like a mention of like, quote, Armenian priests, end quote, in the Icelandic material, like the 4 Armenian priests that came to Iceland. Like, I don't even know how that worked out, but that's just really fucking interesting to consider. Mm-hmm. And this is of course because of all of those alliances that the Scandinavians have with those kings and princes and whatever else you want to call them throughout the Russian river systems, right? So there's Olaf the Holy, when he gets kicked out of Norway, where does he go in exile? He goes straight to Novgorod, right? So you can't do that unless you have a lot of buddies there, right? And I don't know if we know exactly what kind of Christianity was the dominant in Novgorod, but I assume that it was the Orthodox Greek Church, right? That has basically, been coming up through the Black Sea and straight into Kiev, and then I assume also Novgorod. So that would be another situation where you, as as a church with interests in competing with the other churches, with the Roman Catholic and all that stuff, you're of course also trying to convince those Scandinavians from that side that, hey, you should definitely become Greek Orthodox instead of Catholic Roman.
And you know what? Actually, slavery comes into the discussion here as well, because these guys to the east, they make the big box, like this is big slavery, right? Happening in the east. It's not the guys in Birka that take like just three people from the market in Frisia that make the money. Like it's usually I believe that it's more likely that they had people on the ground in the greater Poland area actually hunting people and then bringing them to like Scandinavian merchants, I guess, middlemen that would take them far, like more to the east and all the way to Constantinople. These people, you have like people with Scandinavian names appearing in Iraq. Mm-hmm. And they're being sold down the river, right?
Yeah, no, really, that's so true. Like this is probably the main reason that there is a trade connection with the Caliphate in Baghdad, right? So,
this is where the big money is.
Yeah, it really is, and we can see that on all the finds of dinari all over the place. Like there's so many Arabian coins in Scandinavia.
Oh, there we go. Mm-hmm. This thought's just come to mind, and I don't know whether you will ever have come across this. Maybe have you ever found anyone? Because I guess you get a lot of white supremacists that use this culture today, modern days. Do you ever get people trying to make that link who aren't in this circle or particularly educated on this? When you kind of hear the word of Vikings kept slaves, and make this link and then try and put the two together to be even more negative, I guess, on this side of things.
Absolutely. I mean, this is part of the World War II propaganda as well. Using the history of Vikings as a justification for invading the East. Right? The Vikings did it, so now we will do it. All that kind of crap. They're SS propaganda posters that were made in Scandinavia with that specific imagery of like a SS soldier and then like a Viking in the background, like basically go fight the Bolsheviks or something like that, as sort of like a stable propaganda. So this has been used for a very long time for exactly that that purpose of distinguishing races and ethnicities. Go back to late 19th century Austria, right? You have this very mixed kingdom of like a lot of Germans and then other minorities like Polish and Hungarians and Slovenians and Jews and Serbians and so many different peoples, right? And the Germans are using in Norse mythology, Germanic history, Viking Age, and all that stuff to basically like establish racial I'm cannot say that word for some reason right now. Distinctions between peoples, right, and like claim land boundaries as well. In this prelude to all the Nazi shit that comes later on, right? Because that's really where a lot of those thoughts are established. It is in that period of the late 19th century, and the Germans trying to be German in a multi-ethnic community in general. And so this is furthering of that you see that nowadays too, with like white supremacists are definitely using this in different ways to like claim some kind of like Viking superiority. The whole idea of like Vikings like going out and fighting and colonizing and all that stuff is like being used for that.
But what about on the other side? I guess people looking in and seeing white supremacists use this stuff, but then also because slavery is such a trigger word that kind of then putting the two together and being like, oh well, you've got this white supremacist stuff and Vikings kept slaves, but not kind of ignoring the fact that pretty much everybody around that time period kept slaves, and just going, Vikings kept slaves, Vikings are linked to white supremacy, and been like, it's all bad.
Oh, absolutely. That also happens, right? That there's definitely that way of thinking about it as well. So much of the Viking history in general is just politicized in so many ways that it's fucking annoying. You have no idea how annoying I think it actually is. I mean, even in between Scandinavian countries, right? There's the history of like the Viking Age and who was the most badass Viking. Like, was it Norway or was it Sweden or was it Iceland or was it Denmark and all that stuff? And it just gets really tiresome in the end. Like, come on, guys! Like, really, you can't find anything better to fight about.
Just it's just dick swinging, isn't it? Really,
it really is a lot of dick swinging, and that's it's
not an episode of the podcast without a dick reference in there somewhere. So
of course not.
you know how it is. But it's, I guess, as our culture changes as well, these ideas change within how things are perceived and shown. Because I guess it used to be very much this idea of a big, strong man going around and raping and pillaging. And then now, I guess in modern day, that's not quite as acceptable anymore as maybe it was 10, 20 years ago. So maybe it starts to shift a little bit and people hopefully will portray it as it was rather than
Well, so I mean, I would actually say that nowadays, what has unfortunately happened is that we've sort of come back to the idea of those like cool Viking warriors. That's really what we see all over popular TV, like a show like Vikings, right? Like that's the idea of like the Scandinavian colonizers. That's really what they are, right? And that's that's really a stretch when it comes to the interpretation of Scandinavians in this time period. At some points, they were. I mean, you could definitely say that they were colonizers in England, but elsewhere, maybe not so much. This whole idea of like, going to the West and finding all of these places, and they discovered North America. It's like, fuck off. They hung out for like 5 minutes and then they left again. Like.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see really a flattening of there's like competing narratives. They stick all of them together, kind of. There's on the one hand, there's the Viking settler with like knife between your teeth type thing, and then every woman that appears on the screen is like a warrior.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's also the tendency now to it's like all around Birka in what was it? I think it was a burial chamber, whatever, BJ851, if I remember correctly. So instead of having an individual who's biologically female that was buried with weapons and talking about it, and let's try and understand what's happening here. Suddenly you have these huge, titles in nature. Viking female warrior. We don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a flat all throughout flattening. I think of there's no nuance, right? It's either they're these marauding maniacs, or they're all like woke, like
I guess
gender fluids. Like,
I think that's the time. That's the time we live in where everything has to be super either controversial or it's all about getting clicks on their article, and it's very much on vogue to have these strong female warriors. It's something that stands out, and I guess brings a lot of females probably interested into the Viking world. Whether it's true or not, it probably brings a lot of interest into it. So to be able to go, we found a shield maiden, and then put it in a headline, it's very clickable, rather than there's a late, if the headline was proof of Viking shield maiden, or there's a lady that was buried with weapons. Like you can see why they go with that, because it's all about getting people to react, I guess. And that's it's kind of unfortunate that modern culture and what's happening at the time influences how people are educated on history, because at the end of the day, history's already happened. We should be trying to portray it as closely to what it is, rather than letting it be swayed by our modern ideas.
Absolutely.
And that's probably the best thing I've ever said on this podcast. So somebody soundbite that, and we're going to put it in a little clip, and I'm going to post it on the internet somewhere. So yeah, there we go. So we've got a little bit of time. Yeah, mic drop. That's it. So we've got a little bit of time left. I'm smiling now.
He's proud.
Not because of that. I'm just chuckling to myself. So we've got a little bit of time left. Matthias, you made a post this week that I quite liked. I believe you may have been under the influence at the time. You let me know privately, but I'm telling everyone that you were maybe a little bit inebriated. Hopefully Harrington's there to pull up your Facebook post about Heimdall. Oh no, not this one. The Facebook post. One job. He's had an hour and 10 minutes to figure this out. Then Matthias, read away.
All right, yeah. So it says, "Hey mortals, PSA for the people. Heimdallr heitir inn. Han heitir og Hallinskiði og Gullintanni. Tennar hans váru af gulli." That's the quote from Snorri Sturluson in Gylfaginning 27. And that means Heimdallr is the name of one, and he's also called Hallinskiði and Gullintanni. His teeth were made of gold. And end quote. The Nordic god Heimdall has grills. My god is more gangster than your god. Thank you for your attention.
Gangster with an A, not an ER, because you are cool.
Because I am cool.
So I find this very interesting. So does that mean that he had literal gold teeth? Or as I saw our friend at Gamester put, does it mean that maybe his teeth, his personal hygiene wasn't that good and he just had yellow teeth?
I thought he was saying that it was a major diss because he didn't really have any teeth at all. He had to get them replaced with gold.
Okay. Maybe I just came up with my own theory that he has yellow teeth. He was British.
Yeah, so the backstory for this is that I've been up late doing a lot of work and all those things, and also having a couple of beers along with that, and then this popped into my mind, it's a good question. Is this a diss or is this what does this actually mean? Like, what are we dealing with here? One of the interesting things, and that you can say broadly about the Nordic gods, is that all of these like weird attributes that they have, they're really funky. Like, a god with one hand, a god with like one eye, a god with golden teeth. Like, are we seeing a pattern here? Like, where's the wooden leg? Like, this is a pirate ship. Come on. Like, that's really what we're dealing with here. There are a bunch of like all we need is Jack Sparrow in there, and it's like perfect. I think that's really what we're dealing with here. I like, of course, scholarship has like made a big deal out of his golden teeth, and it's like might be something with the sun or something like that, but when it comes down to it, I'm pretty sure that there's like a lot of humor involved in writing this stuff down. I mean, I'm pretty sure Snorri Sturluson was sitting in his turf hut just giggling his ass off while he was probably also, under the influence of something once in a while.
I mean, it's quite cool, though, isn't it? Like, it's a sign of wealth, I guess. He had gold teeth. It just means he was different. Yeah. Obviously, nobody, I imagine, had gold teeth back then.
I mean, I don't think so, but you never know.
Oh, please find some gold teeth one day.
Well, so that's one of the things that I'd say. Like, this is the stuff that if like we were putting Grandpa in the grave with gold teeth, that somebody would probably like snatch them up.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, maybe inherit them even.
Who knows? Maybe they all had grills and we just don't know about it.
I fucking hope so, man.
I would absolutely love that. That would be the best. So one of the other comments I saw in there was somebody mentioned about Heimdall being referenced to have dark skin, and that made me then think of obviously the Marvel Cinematic Universe's MCU for the geeks out there, like me. Obviously their choice to have Idris Elba, and I for some reason people fucking complained about that at the time because people are assholes, and it's not like he's a fucking god or anything, and he can be whatever color skin he wants. But is there any truth to that in like the source material of him being referenced to having darker skin than say the other gods?
Actually, not as far as I know.
Okay,
but there is something that makes the Marvel choice even more fun, and that is that he is called the White God. Like in that section where it says that he also has grills, he's called the White God, and so
I mean, I hope Marvel trolled the fuck out of everyone because of that.
I
would like to think that.
Did. I kind of like it. And of course, now all those assholes who are mad about that with Marvel, they're going to descend upon our podcast too.
Oh, probably, but I mean, the people are just weird. Like, it's a god. Like, it's like the same people get upset about Idris Elba maybe being James Bond. James Bond can't be black. Well, fuck off. Yeah, he can. He's not a real person. And Idris Elba can be whoever the fuck he wants to be. It's Idris Elba. Like, that guy's mint. Who cares? As long as the film's good, I don't give a shit.
I mean, and also thinking about medieval, like the actual medieval reality. You definitely could have. I mean, people traveled around, and you had some pretty rich people going around from place to place. You had, people traveling from Iraq, from Iberia to Schleswig-Holstein. So why not complaining about their singing, that it sounds like dogs?
Yeah.
Why not? They could be any color they want it to be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for fuck's sake, there's a giant in Norse mythology called leopard. So
Yeah, exactly. It's just shitty people being shitty people, I guess.
really
which is all too common,
Another
unfortunately.
constant in history.
Yeah, I imagine that doesn't change. I imagine that's something that there's been around for as long as time. so we just said people like, oh, Black James Bond isn't realistic. The dude has a hand grenade and a 1-inch pen. It's like realism is in your worry, which is true. I mean, which is the James Bond movie where he has a car that turns invisible? Because that fucking thing pissed me off. It's like it's a car and it somehow camouflages itself into, sure, it's in Iceland, like just goes invisible, and it's fucking hilarious. I think it's like the last Pierce Brosnan one, Die Another Day. Me and my friend watched it the other day, and it is hilarious because the car goes invisible, but he still has a V8 engine, and you can hear it, and he's like driving behind these two guards, literally 2 foot away from them. And it's like, fuck off. You can see the tires in the snow and hear the engine. And these two guys are just like, oh, yeah, no invisible car here. Well, yeah, there is. Because you can hear the engine, you knobs. But
I haven't even, I haven't seen past the first Pierce Brosnan movie, I think.
Oh, Die Another Day. We should do a watch along of Die Another Day because it is hilarious. It is absolutely brilliant. It's unreal. So we have one more thing for Harrington to pull up. I've been saving this YouTube comment for about 4 weeks now, just for this episode, because it fits so nicely into it. So, Mike, if you are there and you can pull this one up, this may be my favorite comment that we've had so far. Matthias, if you want to read it out so I don't have to stutter and splutter like I did in high school.
Yes. Somebody called Out of Bubblegum writes, I can't see the last bit because I get like these chat notifications. Okay.
I think if you go into the second one, they're all on there. I just left that one on because I had a pretty picture of me on.
Yeah, I love your conversation and information, but that doesn't mean I approve of Vikings. So I will give a thumbs down, but I hope you continue producing content because that's how we all learn. Keep up the good work.
Which in itself is the best comment we've ever had, just because it's like, I like what you do, but I don't really like it. But keep doing what you're doing, and I hope it goes well for you. It's like the most passive-aggressive compliment ever.
Yeah, it's odd.
And it's like the whole, I don't approve of Vikings. It's like, well, yeah, but it still existed. Like, and it's just the fact that they've also taken the time to watch a video about Vikings. It's like, it's not hidden what our podcast is about. It's called
this is
the Nordic Mythology podcast.
Level trolling right here.
And,
okay, so
and the video they commented on also is like Danelaw deep. It was the Danelaw deep, but Danelaw deep dive. Fuck the alliteration. Who did that? Danelaw deep dive with Roderick Dale. It's like it's pretty. You know what you're getting. It's not like you stumbled upon it by accident and gone, oh no, Vikings.
No, that was a weird one, but this person goes on though to say a couple more interesting things.
Mike, can you pull it back up again? Maybe, hopefully. Oh, where's he?
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, so the person goes on to say, The entire legal system of today was created by the Vikings. So if you love lawyers, then you love okay, not really true either, bro. But fine. And then we get the best one, and that is, it is my conviction that the Vikings are the tribe of Dan in the Bible.
That I can get on board with. That's a little bit of me, is that?
Totally. Who was the serpent tribe? Danelaw is completely lawless. It is contradistinction to the 10 Commandments. Okay, puffing some of the hard shit right there. Okay, so now let's get an assessment of this. It's the tribe of Dan.
Wonderful. Okay, so do you want the? I could be the Jew of information.
Do it.
I sent this to you, and you did some digging.
I did some digging. I simply had to. I was cracking, laughing, and then I had to understand where on earth this came from. So apparently, it was like a 19th century thing called Nordic Israelism. And maybe that's a good opportunity to say that, like, in the 19th century, so other than Nazis, you had another branch of banana heads thinking that they're all actually the real sons of Israel. They're the Jews OG. Mm-hmm. And then you start like finding them all over the world. So specifically, these guys who were the founders of the Pentecostal church in Denmark. They took on some ideas from British Israelism. And basically their point was that the peoples of like Northern Europe were the 10 lost tribes of Israel. And they went as far as, this is absolutely wonderful. The Norwegians, they said, were the tribe of Naphtali. The Danes were the tribe of Dan. Unsurprisingly, this is a half-baked philology for you. And the Jutes, drum roll, were the Jews.
Oh fuck! So I'm OG Jew. Fuck yeah.
Which is weird because the Jews were not part of the lost tribes of Israel. They are the only ones that were not lost.
Which is the whole point. Yes, of course.
That was
but it doesn't really matter, you know? That's not the point.
Wow, of course, yeah.
I like this theory very much, that if we, you know, like, this is the cool, we're actually Vikings, you know, if it goes the other way around, perfect.
Yeah, but no, this is what you get when you start, you know, doing Protestantism, right? Like they all of these different, you know, local kings in Northern Europe, they secede from the Catholic Church. They're all like, we're Protestants now, right? And then they're like, well, that means that we're the true tribe, right? That belongs to God. And then you get, you know, crazy Swedes in the 1700s that are like, yeah, actually, you know, originally Swedish was spoken in the Garden of Eden. And also, Sweden was the original Atlantis, and we invented civilization in the first place. And, you know, a lot of other funky shit happened. Thank you so much. Swedish scholarship from the 1700s. Anyway, going on from there, then we get all of these other crazies, right? So the stuff that you just told us about, Shachar, like, that was amazing right there. And this is also what, you know, most of like evangelicalism or whatever you want to call it over here in the US is like founded on, like basically finding New Jerusalem and the Garden of Eden, because these people actually thought that we could go to the Americas and then find the Garden of Eden here, because now that everybody had accepted that the world was round and all that stuff, that would mean that we would get to the far end of Asia if we went west. You see how, you know, you just need to like be drinking a little bit of wine with cocaine in it, and then it all makes sense.
Shortcut, what are you talking about?
So do we think that person's a troll, or are they serious?
That's the real question right there.
I can't figure it out.
If I had to say, I mean, in another comment that we didn't see, he says something about, I'm assuming it's he, I don't know, maybe it's not. Please don't judge me. So I'm assuming out of bubblegum has a lot to do with Christianity, because in another comment, they write about the analogy of the tree from Paul. Paul talks about the grafting of the wild olive on the like cultured olive, which is, by the way, a good trick that Christianity pulled to get everybody on board. So I'm guessing maybe out of bubblegum is a Christian troll with Christian background. That's my
a hybrid.
I think you're right. I mean, so just to attach a comment to this, the crazy Danish Pentecostals. There are still really weird, far out Danish Christian sects that do believe that they descend from the tribe of Dan. That's a real thing. There was just a couple of weeks ago, I read an article about this mother and her daughter who are like living in the woods somewhere in Denmark, just trying to be completely off grid and totally Christian and descend from Dan. So yeah, that's the thing.
Tribe of Dan sounds. I want to say it sounds awesome, but I don't know enough about them, and they might have done really shitty things, in which case I want to distance myself from them.
Oh, dude, you want to start a compound, you want to get like a little harem and all that stuff, and then you can be the leader of Dan, the tribe of Dan.
I mean, that sounds well, sounds all right, but I'm going to get myself in trouble.
Yeah, you probably will.
I mean, I can't think of a single like compound cult type situation that's ever gone well.
It's a matter of size, right? If it's big enough, it gets popular enough, then it's not a cult anymore.
No, then it's a religion.
Yeah, well, yeah, you could just, like hold the entire American legal system hostage until they recognize you as a church and don't have to pay taxes anymore.
Usually, involving the people of Israel in this this theory helps promoting it as a religion, just based on,
Yeah, what is up with this thing of like everybody? Why do everybody want to be the people of Israel? Like, come on.
It's me. We get into trouble. Look, past like 5,000 years have not been a picnic for the Jewish people.
That's a good point.
Okay. On that note, let's wrap this up. So, thank you very much. This has been fun. Like I say, it's been one that I've been looking forward to. It's a topic I've definitely had interest in, and it tiptoed around I guess at the start and got a little bit flustered. But no, it's fun. Hopefully, we've set the record straight. I mean, it's one of those things. I think slavery is such a trigger word these days. It's as soon as you mention it, you kind of. I know for me, like my hands go a bit clammy, and everybody doesn't want to say the wrong thing, but you have to also remember these are people that are 1,000 years ago, and it was a very much a different time. You can't hold them by our standards. That doesn't mean that they're good people, bad people. It's just they were people, and you've got to look at it through an objective eye, and that's what you've got to try and do. It. You can't put our modern understanding and our modern emotions onto it. That's the second mic drop of the episode. So let's just end it right there. Cut it. Everyone go home. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed it.
So did we. Thank you. I'm telling you, look, with all the different topics that we've covered today and other controversial issues and Shachar being Jewish and in Israel and all that stuff, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of fucking shit posting on this episode.
Oh, I'm going to get hate mail just from Italy alone.
Yeah, right.
Just for that comment.
We didn't even shit on their Eurovision win last night. So
that was the best part of it. That's if a rock act wins, then I'm happy. I don't care if the song's good, bad. If it's a rock act, then it's better than like the rest of it, in my opinion.
So coming from the American context, it sounds very much like Southern rock, what they were doing. Like, so I don't know.
It's still a rock song.
That's true. Yeah,
they didn't have Flow Rider come out halfway through to try and sway the people. And apparently they got caught doing cocaine off the table mid.
Holy shit!
I mean, I don't know whether it's just like the camera angle maybe looks like it, because I feel like that'd be extremely brave to do mid show, but it also would be very rock and roll.
It is very rock and roll and ballsy. So, by the way, of course, there's one person in that band who's like Danish Italian. I mean, and they have like a Danish name even, and so of course, like the Danes are already starting to claim of some kind of weird victory out of this as well.
Obviously, we got 0 points because everybody in Europe hates us.
Well, you have been kind of annoying lately.
we just we watched it last night, and I was like, "Yeah, we're getting nothing." Like, and the worst thing is the absolute worst part was that when they read out the people, you know, like every country has like a person who reads out the result, and ours was Amanda Holden. For first reason, I don't know why she's fucking famous. Apparently, she married some guy and they had like, I don't know, something happened. She ended up being famous. But then she comes on and says hello in 2 different languages. I can't remember if it was like, I'm guessing one was Dutch and French. So she says hello in both of them and then proceeds to say, but I don't know which one's which. I'm like, bitch, why the fuck are you making us sound worse than we already do? Like, we already think we're ignorant. So you're going to come on and say hello in 2 languages and then say to the whole of Europe, yeah, but I'm that ignorant and I think the English is so good that I don't know the difference between the 2. Fuck off. Why would you do that? Why would you make us look so much worse, you fucking idiot?
I really need to thank you personally, because it's really hard to come out worse than Israel now. So thank you.
Yeah, well, how did it go with Israel?
They were on the left-hand side of the board with like 100 points. And I was like, what? Well, everyone just doesn't like us. Like, even the countries that aren't even in Europe, like Israel, Russia, Australia, like they're like, fuck the English, we're not giving them any points. Fuck those guys.
I'm sorry. That does suck, man.
Well, you know, we're used to it. I think we get no points quite regularly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have been really, really good about not saying things about Brexit in general.
I mean, it's quite ironic though, because even though we get no points, like we're one of like the only 5 countries that don't have to qualify for it because we put a certain amount of money towards it, I think. So I think there's like us and 4 other big 5 quote unquote countries that put they do something to do with like putting it on. So like obviously it's like, yeah, you can have the money, but we're not fucking voting for you. You're not having any points. It's like, but I think that also it doesn't help that I just don't think they think that we take it very seriously, which we probably don't take it that seriously either.
I mean,
no.
To be honest, I avoid it as best as I can, which is really hard in a small, like you know, back when I lived in Denmark, that small European country, right? Like, it's really hard to avoid Eurovision Song Contest because every other fucker that you know is like, oh yeah, we're gonna get all real down with this and like champagne and I don't know what, and it's like, yeah, I'll be sitting over here in a dark basement listening to really grimy black metal while you guys do that. Bye.
I always wonder how other countries treat Eurovision and how into it I get, because I think over here there's this feel that nobody gives a fuck about it for 364 days of the year, and everyone's like shitting on it, like, oh yeah, it's just cheesy shit, we'll get nothing. And then on the day it's like secretly everyone sits down and watches it and they're like, oh, I hope we do all right. Like, no, of course not. Like it's like this. I guess it's very British of like we don't care, but secretly we do care.
There are some countries that have like poured their entire heart and soul into it, like Iceland, for instance. Like that's part of like a stable corner of Icelandic identity to be part of Eurovision Song Contest, and also always make it political in some way.
Yeah, it's a good laugh.
It is.
I mean, I still don't understand how like Israel and Australia got into the Eurovision Song Contest
to defend us. I mean, Israel has been in the Eurovision for very long.
But
Since the 50s, right? Like or 60s. Like,
I just mean
it's the 60s. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We may as well just change the name to like the World Song Contest, and then let's just have everyone in there.
The World Without America Song Contest.
Well, see, this is the thing, right? Because like for American football, there's the World Cup. And as far as I understand, it's only America that's in it. so there's that.
No, you have like the Super Bowl, or you have like the World Series for baseball.
Yeah, and it's like, but maybe the Canadians are involved once in a while. I don't know.
And I think same with like basketball. And I remember learning about this when I did sport at college. It's like America. We're going to obsess so many people this episode.
Well, just roll with it at this point.
But like in the USA, because they were kind of shitty at all other sports, they just went, you know what? We're just going to make our own sports and be the best at them. And then, I mean, it's a good idea, but that's why you get so many like sports that sprouted up in the USA that weren't anywhere else, like baseball, basketball, American football. Because like, you know what? We're just going to change your games, and we're going to be the best in the world at it.
So that's actually and really interesting when it comes to sports, right? There's a couple of sports that are really international, right? Soccer is one, but aside from that, cricket and rugby are like straight up really international types of sports that are played by so many different countries.
I feel like we have a lot to do with why cricket is popular all over the world.
I think so. Rugby too.
let's not talk about that one. Why all these countries play British sports. Right. Let's wrap this one up.
On in the Middle East, though, at least in our corner here. Nobody plays cricket here. We go straight to the violence.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That's a great note to end the show on. We go straight to the violence.
You get a lot of wrestling over there, a lot of violent style sports, I guess.
In Israel, or in Israel, Palestine, whatever you want
Middle
to call
Eastern.
Whatever's here.
I mean, like Middle Eastern areas, you get like a lot of wrestling combat.
You really like soccer. We suck at it, but we really like it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Does Israel have a national sport?
I'd say it's soccer, but again, we're not good at it. So
fair enough. Right. For the last time, let's.
There's a joke about running to the bomb shelter that I'm not making here.
Oh dear. Okay.
Sorry, please, be gentle with the hate mail.
Shachar, have you got anything you would like to promote, plug? Shout like where people can find you, send you hate mail.
You can send me hate mail. And on Instagram, if you're interested, I'm on Aurora _Ost, AUST, like Aurora Australis, because Aurora is Shachar. Yeah. And if you're interested, a dear friend and a colleague of mine, with the encouragement of our supervisor, we started the Israeli Forum of Early Medieval Studies. So if you're interested in, it's quite academic, but if you're really interested in getting the latest news on early medieval history, then you can follow our Facebook page on the Early Medieval Forum, the Forum of Early Medieval Studies, the Israeli Forum of Early Medieval Studies. And we're working on an Instagram page to come.
Ooh.
Awesome.
Also, excuse me, didn't you just come out with an article in a book?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh yeah, maybe mention that one.
Thank you. So the book it's a really, really great volume. I highly, highly recommend it. It's called Viking Age Slavery. And I have an article there. It's called The Unwitting Apostles of the North, Human Trafficking and Christianization in the Viking Age. But there are many articles written by super important people, and I'm absolutely honored and shocked that I'm in this volume.
It's a good cast. I have seen some of the other authors, so you're in very good company.
That's good.
Yeah, that's it.
Matthias, where can people send you hate mail?
Well, you can always send me hate mail on my Instagram profile. I have been getting so many friend requests on Facebook lately. I'm pretty sure half of them aren't even real humans.
No.
It's just so you can find me on those platforms. I'm still debating with myself to just shut down my Facebook altogether. Because it's a cesspool, but I'm you can find me there, and then I'll be posting random shit once in a while.
There we go.
Oh, I've gotten a lot of friend requests from Bob Ragnarsson and his buddies.
All right, if you want to follow me personally, it's Daniel_Farron1 on Instagram. You can send me hate mail if you really want. I don't care. I probably should open it. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review, a positive review, hopefully a 5-star rating and a positive review, preferably on iTunes. It really helps bump us up the ratings. It helps people find it. Hopefully, not everyone wants to start a new podcast. They'll see the review and hopefully click and have a listen. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram at Nordic Mythology Podcast. The website is nordicmythologypodcast.com, and you can get this wonderful t-shirt that I'm wearing, which was done by the Raven from the North, which is Odin with 2 eyes and a raven helmet, I guess. Raven horns, something like that.
Raven horns, yeah. I got him tattooed on my arm too, but he doesn't have raven horns. It looks more like, snails.
Oh, well, the god of snails.
The god of snails.
We are trying to push our YouTube. So if you get a moment, please pop out to our YouTube channel, Nordic Mythology Podcast, and just hit subscribe. We're going to be popping up a bunch of short miniature videos, just bite sizes from the episodes. And if you want to support us on a more in-depth level, Patreon is the best place. And you also get to join us for our bonus episode that we record straight after the main show every week. Me and Mathias sit down and
talk shit about the Vikings.
Yeah. Watch an episode of the Vikings TV show and let you know our thoughts. Mathias tells us some of it's true. Usually the things that I think are going to be the most bullshit end up being real, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And it's usually just a good laugh. It's lighthearted, and
our audience has a bingo game going based off of what kind of things will Matthias say next and what else will be in there. So it's a lot of fun.
That's it. Exactly. So if you want to join in and watch that, like I said, just pause on Patreon at any level. It really helps us out, helps us keep going. We seem to be growing more members to the team daily who help us out. It's not just me and Matthias. Obviously, we sit here and speak, but we've got a bunch of people behind the scenes who, whether it's Saxon Storyteller doing the artwork or Shannon, Mike doing the editing, it really does help out and helps us keep those people there helping us. So there we go. That's the episode. So thank you very much.